Political Desk.
The time is 8:13. You're on Power Breakfast this morning with Tessa Dooms. Dr. Ongama Mtimka joins us this morning, the acting director of the Raymond Mhlaba, yes, I hope I said that right, Center for Governance and Leadership at the Nelson Mandela University. It's a mouthful, Ongama. I was looking at that and got very intimidated by your title. But welcome to Power Breakfast, Dr.
Good morning, Tessa, and to your listeners. Thank you for having me. It's important, when we have these centers in the universities, the branding insists that they get out there. So thank you for that.
Sure, no worries there, Doc. So the political week that was not as eventful as what we saw in July, but of course a few things popping up there, not the least of them being the NEC going into what must have been a really, really tough NEC with everything happening around the US and so many negotiations that need to be taking place there. And then, of course, this big issue around the SACP. It does seem that they've had their hands full. We, of course, await the press conference today. But what do you imagine will come out of this?
Yeah, so I think that the ANC goes into this meeting with huge domestic and international issues. In fact, the domestic issues are so huge that hundreds of thousands of jobs could be threatened as if the party is not able to play its role in ensuring an effective response to this a trade war with the U.S. In fact, it's a trade skirmish, as it were. And so I think that yes, one notes what government is doing, but I think there's greater political work that has to be done, both in relation to relations with Washington, but also in terms of exploring new markets. You just don't leave those things only to administrators, because
absolutely
you can also achieve a lot by the political work that can be done at a political party or politician to politician level.
But at this point, you would think that the ANC carries very little sway with Washington. We've seen coming from Senate and Congress that even they are starting to create potential laws against ANC politicians in particular. So definitely the idea that they have, some sort of favor and curry some favor within Washington doesn't seem to be top priority at the moment. But of course, questions are going to be asked about the ANC and their foreign policy, and have been asked about whether they're acting in the ANC's interest, in personal interest, or in the interest of the country. Just to give you a sense, one of our listeners here, ST, on WhatsApp, saying that he holds the view that Dr. Pandor was conflicted when dealing with the issue of Israel, that her personal interest of faith were motivating her view, her principled stance around that. But it was not a principled stance, it was more biased, an extreme position. They're insinuating that personal and ANC interests were put above the interest of the country. How does the ANC start to negotiate all of this and also get buy-in from South Africans on the positions that they hold in terms of foreign policy?
The U.S. is a divided country, and even Washington itself is divided. So there's very much a lot of avenues to explore for the ANC, both in terms of the opposition and also in terms of Republicans. The beauty about the U.S. system is that the party discipline is not the be-all and end-all.
Yeah, central democratic centralism doesn't reign.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important to continue to engage there. But beyond that, Tessa, I think souring relations with what one may call countries whose posture sometimes borders on neo-colonialism are forcing us to face the elephant in the room. Why hasn't the liberation in the continent led to greater integration among us? Why is it still expensive today to trade with the rest of the world than it is to trade among each other? The building of infrastructure that integrates the continent has become urgent, and in fact, rhetoric cannot suffice today. There needs to be very strong leveraging of some of the logistics networks that some of our private sector has built in the continent. And there needs to be political support for greater integration in terms of infrastructure rollout in the continent there.
Yeah, and you would wonder where the ANC falls on that, given that they just engaged with the liberation movements, many of them who are the cause of some of the breakdowns in infrastructure and breakdowns even of economic systems within the continent. They don't seem to have a lot of sway on those other countries. I mean, Zim is such a important example for us. We should be leveraging or leaning a lot on them to do better because we suffer the consequences, of course. So we'll see what comes out of the NEC as it regards these foreign relation issues. You know, there were election specialists who would say to political parties, foreign policy doesn't win you votes. It doesn't win you votes. It doesn't lose you votes. I think those days are over. Hey, I think foreign policy has a huge input.
Yeah, in fact, we saw that playing a big role leading to the elections. Yes, data still does show that in the final analysis, people vote on the basis of purely domestic issues. But the fact of the matter is that some of the crises, socioeconomic crises countries may face, definitely do arise from foreign policy. And also for South Africa, and I think that this is to the point that the caller was making, that there was a degree of veering off from the middle ground as far as, for example, conflict in the Middle East. Obviously, that conflict does beg for South Africa to continue to play its human rights role, but maybe there was a sense in which some of the management of our approach and our true intentions in that conflict wasn't communicated so clearly as to show that our core issue are the problems that are taking place as far as violations of human rights and war crimes, while at the same time still committing to the idea of, for example, two-state solution or whatever the case may be. You know, so I think that Washington has framed our forays into the Middle East as completely anti their interests. And we are partly to blame, partly understandable, by the way, Tessa, because as Mandela rightly said, our freedom is incomplete unless there was freedom in Palestine, and there was greater integration there. And that's a matter of a correct principle. That's what we would have wanted the world to respond like when we were, you know, under a severe oppressive regime ourselves.
But, Doc, I wonder if the climate right now, and especially the way that we're dealing with issues around security issues, whether it's foreign, interests or locally, are actually starting to wane in terms of people's view that we need to be this moral authority if we don't get the basics right. So I think, this question about the tariffs is one example of that. The question around, the ethics and the morals of upholding the human rights of foreign nationals vis-a-vis people saying that hospitals are under siege. You know, all of those things are starting to then minimize people's, steadfastness in terms of we need to be the moral authority. I think Zain Dango used the term, we are the moral superpower of the world. If people don't get what they feel is due to them in South Africa, they're not going to hold on to those. I mean, another example of that is the police minister, the new acting police minister, and his view that, human rights and the police must show, levels of restraint and all of those things and must do things that he believes are within those rights, has been met with a backlash from society saying you're giving rights to criminals over the rest of us. Are we starting to lose the moral authority because we're not delivering on the basics?
No, my issue with the minister, Tessa, in fact, is not the substance of his views about rights and all of that. My issue with him is him entering the fray in a way that frames it as anti the approach that has been taken by Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi without applying his mind about what the specific circumstances of each of the killings have been, without reading reports, for example, as to, in this specific matter, where they justified
yeah.
way. So you can't, when you are starting to lead a portfolio, you come and you take your liberties that all of us have, to comment and say general things and things that are said in jest and in broad principles. You just cannot.
Or the theoretical
Especially in
stuff
an
that you did as a professor.
especially in an environment where there are factions that are fighting and each faction is framing the other as the bad people. You know what I mean? So to come in this and say the message of a faction, the professor should have recognized by the day he was acknowledged as the incoming minister that his rights to speak his mind freely are no longer there. He must apply himself. He must read the reports and then make calls and not confuse us about where he stands based on him speaking to general sentiments that you and I will have.
You know, Ongama, I think in the history of us getting a minister, maybe it's because usually ministers only know minutes before they're going to be, or day before they're going to be put into office. So he's had like a week. I've never heard somebody speak so freely about an office they don't occupy yet. It's actually been a little bit disturbing. He's been a little bit quick to talk, and I think you make a really good point there. Maybe he should get in office first, see what's actually before him, and then make comment. And I don't want to speak to him until he has done that. So thank you for raising that one. But yeah, we'll be looking out for what comes out of that NEC from the ANC today. It was Dr. Ongama Mtimka, who is the acting director of the Raymond Mhlaba Center for Governance Leadership at the Nelson Mandela University.